Tony here. Something a little different today, more for the video game lovers than the horror lovers, but sometimes these things intersect. So there you go. I recently got a new case for my Raspberry Pi retro gaming system. So what this video is essentially, it's going to be a review, side-by-side comparison, teardown, and setup of the Raspberry Pi retro consoles and some of the official Nintendo mini consoles. The one that we're going to focus on today is the Piboxy Entertainment System. I have opened this already and taken a look at it. This is just a case. Well, there's a little more in this box actually, but this is not complete with a working game system. You have to introduce your own formatted Raspberry Pi to make this work. But that's the case we're going to kind of focus on. Everything else is just going to be for comparison's sake. I do have another Raspberry Pi case that I've been using, which is a very popular one, the NESpi case. These are just the boxes, obviously. I'll show you more in a second. But worth note right off the bat is the similarity between how the boxes were set up for these two systems, or these two cases. And I do have an official Super Nintendo Mini from Nintendo, so we'll take a look at that as well. I do not have an official NES Classic. In fact, this was the closest I could get to the official release of the NES Classic Edition. I'll start out by just saying, I realize that there are differing opinions on all of these mini console systems, and I want to get out of the way right now. I am a collector of the original consoles, and I have all the original consoles, and I have tons and tons of games for those original consoles. So this notion that you don't want the mini consoles if you have the original things, it doesn't really hold water in my. I tend to think that once you become a collector of something, all logic goes out the window. So for the people who are saying, well, you don't need a NES Classic Edition because you could get a Raspberry Pi and put as many games as you want on it and put in a case that looks exactly like the NES Classic. That's true, logically, but for a lot of collectors it doesn't matter. For a lot of collectors, they just want the official one because it's official, right? Like I said, logic doesn't really matter necessarily. So why did I buy the Super Nintendo Classic when I had these other things? Well, that's exactly why, because logic doesn't matter. I'm a collector. I like these things. And I've been playing the Super Nintendo. So here's the Super Nintendo Classic, all unboxed. I've been using it, like I said. I really like it. There's a lot of cool elements to it that, sure, you could get the feel with your Raspberry Pi systems, but I like it. So I'm not reviewing that. That's been done to death. I'm going to just put that off to the side. And then currently what I have for my Raspberry Pi. So my Raspberry Pi is inside of, this is the NESpi case. And I use the iBuffalo SNES controller. I also have an NES controller that I could plug in. I'll take that out for a second just to give you a better look at the NESpi case. I really like this one. And if you were looking for a almost perfect representation of the Nintendo Classic, NES Classic Mini, this is pretty damn good. And in fact, some people would say it's even better because this opens and it has the controller, USB ports there and an Ethernet port in the front there. Some people don't like that because all the wires are hanging out from the front, but I don't really use those. You have the other two USBs where the controllers go. And again, I'm not reviewing this particular case, so I'm just kind of showing you for comparison's sake that this does look almost exactly like the NES Classic, which is why I bought it, which is why a lot of people like it. The one I'm going to review today, I haven't actually used yet, but I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to set it up, is the Piboxy Entertainment System. This one does not look exactly like the NES Classic. Some people might be happy about that, if you're looking for something a little different. Some people might dislike it for that very reason. It is smaller. I already kind of unsnapped it, so I'm just going to show you with it sort of together. This is not completely together, but you can see it's a lot smaller comparatively. It's kind of how it goes there. They have some similar aspects to the NESpi case. For instance, this opens, and they have all of the controller ports, all the inputs in the front there, and we have the USB and power on the side of this one. Actually, there's another, not USB and power, it's USB, not USB at all, it's HDMI and audio, and then on the other side is the power right there. Now, as I'm reviewing this, as I was thinking about this case, and obviously I haven't used it yet, but I immediately, off the bat, anyone who doesn't, anyone who only wants something that looks like the exactly like Nintendo Classic, you're not going to want this one. And that's the plain truth of it. But if that kind of thing doesn't matter, this does have some pros that may make it better for functionality than the NESpi case. One of those things, this comes with a fan. This one has the capability of a fan, but you have to buy it separately and put it in yourself, which I did, but that's one thing. So this comes with a working fan. You could see it right there. This one also comes with a little controller. It's an IR, infrared controller. It's really just for turning it on and off. It's one button. But that's still a nice little addition, You turn your system on without having to get up. And inside, you'll see that there are some controller pieces in there, circuit boards, plugs, and they also give you screws and a screwdriver, which is true of the NESpi case as well. You get the screwdriver, the screws, to put it all together. I'll be doing that on camera in a minute. So the other pros to this one, the things that I think are certainly worth considering for functionality, are the fact that the power and reset buttons will actually do a safe shutdown for your system. So that's one of the that was one of the major flaws that people really disliked about the NESpi case, is that if you hit the power button to turn it off, like when you turn it on, fine, it starts it up. But if you just press it to turn it off, it does a cold shutdown. It doesn't go through the proper sequence to shut it down. And the same, I believe, is true for the reset button. If I remember correctly, it just resets the entire system, not the game that you're in. I might be wrong about that. It's been a while since I pressed the reset button. But there are workarounds for that, and if you go into like the builder communities, there are a lot of people who don't want to use these cases at all, and they do the 3D printed cases and all that stuff, which is great. If you're into that and you have the time, you want to do that, that's awesome. And there were people who figured out how to fix that in the NESpi case, but that involves buying a bunch of pieces and soldering and cutting wires, and for some people that's they enjoy doing that. That's great. I didn't want to mess around with that stuff, even though I do like doing that kind of stuff. I really didn't want to cut into the wires and things in there. So this one, that's a huge pro to this case, that the buttons will do safe shutdowns and everything. I do want to point out here that the buttons themselves are, listen to it, they're like kind of clicky buttons, as in other words, they are not the traditional feel of if you press those in and they stay in, kind of like the original, Nintendo systems. These are a lot more like the original system, whereas these are not really, they're not trying to replicate it. So that might turn some people off as well, is the feel and the look of this. But I'm going to go ahead and take my Pi out of this one and put it into the other case. I'll record that so you can see the whole process. And besides just putting it in, there is a little bit of work that you have to do in the terminal for the script to work. So if you want this to do the safe shutdown with the power button, you do have to get into the terminal of the Pi and put in some scripts there. You can kind of see it right there. So we'll talk about that. I don't know if I'm going to actually film that part of it, but I might. Okay, everybody, so here are the two cases side by side. This one is the NESpi, and this is the Piboxy. I just wanted to show you side by side really quick so that you could see that the NESpi had significantly more going on in there. They had 1, 2, 3 different connectors. That's the Ethernet connector. This is for the USB ports, and then this is the general power, I think, to the NESpi. And they also had a fan connector here, which I bought this fan and put it in myself, but that would go to the fan connector. So there's a lot more going on in there, but we're working specifically, of course, with the Piboxy. So we're going to take a look at this one, which seems a lot more simple in terms of like what we're doing here. There's one connector, and there is the fan. I apologize for the phone. So here's my Pi. I do have a Raspberry Pi 2, so I have a Wi-Fi dongle in there. The Pi 3 does not need that. It has the internal Wi-Fi, or at least you know, connected to it already. So here we go. Looking at the instructions, and I think this is going to be upside down for you if I'm not mistaken, but it says to screw the Raspberry Pi into the case and then connect the cable to pin 1 and pin 8. Oh no, pin 1 and pin 8 are spare. Please note the directions of pin 2 and pin 4. Alright, so do not connect the wrong cable, blah blah blah. And then assemble the fan top cover. Looks like it's just telling me to plug that in to the fan. And worth note also, and I forgot to mention this earlier, is that the NESpi case screws in together, the cover, and the Piboxy actually just snaps together. So that's something else to think about when you're choosing between the two, if you are choosing between the two. So we're going to go ahead and get the Pi in there. Okay, so screws are in. That was pretty difficult. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was kind of like working with a dexterity puzzle. It was a pain in the butt, but I got them in. I should mention that you always want to make sure you're grounded when you're working with electronics. I didn't say that earlier on. You might notice I don't have a static bracelet on, but I do touch a piece of metal usually on the side off camera. Make sure that I am decharged, not carrying a static charge or anything like that. Okay, so you want to press pretty firmly, get that on the end there. Next step is simply to plug in the fan and then click everything closed. Okay, once everything's plugged in, looks like we are just going to snap this back together, make sure everything is in place. Yep, little snap there, and we're good. Alright, so that is that. Notice here that with my dongle, this does have to stay open, and we're going to be plugging our controllers in there too, so that's a necessity there, is to just leave that kind of open that way. So again, something you might want to think about if you're going to get this one, that you will have to leave it open in order to access the various ports. And last thing here is getting our SD card back in, and that's just going to be slid in like normal. Alright, and we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and test this all out, and I'll let you know how it works. Just doing a little voiceover here. This is where I put in the script. You can see there, starts with the, well, it says piboxy.com in there. That's a part of the instruction. So I typed that in using the keyboard, and then I hit enter right there, and it has started to install all of the needed information to let the power button and reset button work. This took a little while. It took about, I want to say, maybe 5 minutes, and then while I was in the terminal, I went ahead and updated RetroPie with sudo apt-get update, and then sudo apt-get upgrade, and that took quite a while as well. So I click off here, and then my final video clip is just testing out the remote. So you can see I hit the remote, and you can see the little blue light goes and starts flashing, and the system starts up properly. So the IR remote does work, which is pretty cool. And it also shuts it down if you were to press the button to shut it down. And after that, I loaded up 10 Yard Fight, so I put a game on because I wanted to see if the reset button would in fact reset the game or simply reset the entire system. So there I'm pressing the reset button to see what would happen. And as you can see, it resets the entire system, not just the game. So basically the reset button on the system works as a restart button. So if you want to restart the entire system, and you could see the reason I was filming this is I wanted you to see that it does run through the proper shutdown scripts, and then it was restarting there. And after that, the only thing left to test was the power button. So after everything started back up, I did go ahead and press the power button while it was on. So I press it, and it blinks, and it goes into the correct shutdown scripts, and everything works as it should. So I'm pretty happy with the Piboxy. Again, it really determines, the way you would choose is form versus functionality. Do you want a system that is going to look exactly like the NES Classic, or a system that is going to function a little better, in my opinion, with the IR remote, the safe shutdown, and safe restart? Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time. Breathe deep of the night.